American Revolution Part 2. And this time, it's personal. So you didn't do so well the first time taking this American Revolution test. Well, don't get mad, get glad, because you now have another opportunity to relearn the information you did not learn well the first time, to fill out that worksheet that you have in front of you with all those blank lines, to study that worksheet, to make note cards from it, to study those note cards, and then to take this test one more time and obtain victory. Let's talk about this American Revolution. Let's talk about the birth of the United States of America, the country that I love, but this love didn't start with love, it started with hate. It started with war, the French and Indian War. Now check this out. You see this number 1 right up here? That means we are on number 1 of your remediation worksheet. Now I'm going to start flashing text in. Whatever words are red, I want you to fill in at those blanks. So check this out. You had a fight in North America, and it all started because of the French and British rivalry led to war. The French and Indian War is between France and Great Britain, and in France and Great Britain, they've been fighting for hundreds of years. And they fight another war in the Ohio River Valley and in Canada. Now, who wins? Well, the French don't win because the French usually never win wars. And the British victory forces France out of Canada and west of the Appalachian Mountains. Take a look at these maps with me. You see all this orange over here? That's all French land holdings. That's before the French and Indian War. And then in 1763, after the French and Indian War, I don't see any orange over here because the orange is gone. The French are gone. They have lost the French and Indian War. So, number 3. If you're a British colonist, you're saying to yourself, well, this is great. You used to have French people over the Appalachian Mountains, and now this is land that I can get. I want that land. I also don't want to pay any taxes. Even though wars are expensive, I don't want to pay any taxes because I'm not represented in Parliament. But first, I want that land. Great Britain says you don't get that land because they draw a line. And that line was the Proclamation of 1763. It said there will be no settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. You cannot jump over those mountains and get that land because, you see, there are people over there, Native Americans, and the Native Americans do not want British colonists coming over. And if the British colonists come over, they get into a fight. And if they get into a fight, the British colonists can't take care of themselves. And then Big Daddy, that's Great Britain, Big Daddy has to bail them out. And that is expensive. And Great Britain doesn't want to pay for that. So this land is too costly for the British to protect, which is why the line is drawn. Speaking of cost, wars are expensive. One way to get money if you're a government is to tax. Number 4. In order to pay for the war, the French and Indian War, the British passed the Stamp Act. Now, the stamps weren't that expensive, but they went on almost every printed document. They were just, in today's money, just a couple of pennies. But still, the colonists despised the Stamp Act because they said, no taxation without representation. I am not represented in Parliament, therefore I should not have to pay a stamp tax. And then things get bloody on the streets of Boston in 1770. The Boston Massacre occurs, in which there are protesters in Boston protesting against the taxes, and they are fired on by British troops. Several die, and now this thing is getting more serious. Alright, so we're building up to the American Revolution. Well, what's one thing that really sparks this revolution? Well, that would be a little party. The Boston Tea Party. In 1773, the Sons of Liberty dumped tea into Boston Harbor in response to a tax against tea. They were taxing all sorts of things to try to raise money. Tea was one of them. So they dumped tea, the British colonists dumped tea into Boston Harbor. Great Britain is so upset, they pass a series of acts called the Intolerable Acts, which shut down Boston Harbor and strip away rights to British colonists. The colonists respond by kind of forming their own government for the first time. That would be the First Continental Congress. It is the first time that most of the colonies acted together. Now, we cannot say all of the colonies because one colony was not there and that was Georgia. All colonies except for Georgia sent a representative to the First Continental Congress. Now, there's no real fighting. There's just talking. And then, in the fields of Massachusetts, at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, Minutemen, colonists who are ready within a minute's time to fight, skirmish against British troops. This war has begun! But before we can talk more war, let's talk about how the British colonists are feeling about this war. They were not excited about it. The war did not have popular support in Great Britain, so if you're an American military commander, one thing you can think of is, we just got to get the British people to give up, to pull out and stop this fighting, and then there can be a United States of America. Alright, before we can get all into the fighting, we got to talk a little bit about colonial differences. There are 3 groups that emerge in the colonies. Now, one are the Patriots. If you are a patriot, you favor complete independence from Great Britain. You are done with the rule of Great Britain. You want to start your own country. Now, you are inspired by the words of John Locke, who we will learn about in just a second, and the pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. Patriots were done with Great Britain, and there was one of the greatest patriots was from Virginia, and that was Patrick Henry. And Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty! Or give me death! Do not tax me. Do not take away any of my natural rights. It is my right to be represented, and you are not representing me, so do not tax me. Do not violate my natural rights." That is a very patriot idea. Now, the other group would be your loyalists. And loyalists wanted to remain loyal to the British Crown. See, I like being British. I like the protection that the British Crown gives me. Besides, it's expensive to back me up if I have to get into a conflict with Native Americans. They believe that taxation was justified to pay for British troops to, and I think I'm blocking this word here, protect colonists from Indian attacks. So all the money that goes to the protection from conflicts with Native Americans makes sense. Go ahead and tax me. I'm a loyalist. I'll stay loyal to the British Crown. Where were the loyalists most strong? They were most strong down south. Southern colonists were more likely to be loyalists. We learned that in the last test when we talked about the colonial groups, because the southern colonies had the strongest cultural and economic. They did business with Great Britain. So the southern colonists are more loyalists. Now, I said there were 3 groups. The last group are the folks that just couldn't make up their mind, and they were the neutrals. Neutrals were colonists who wanted to stay uninvolved in the conflict. Completely out of here, stay out, I don't want to get involved. There are your 3 groups. Patriots want to break free, loyalists want to stay loyal, and the neutrals just cannot make up their mind. Now, we talked about the ideas that inspired the Patriots, the ideas of Locke and the ideas of Thomas Paine. Let us dig into that a little bit more. Let's talk about John Locke. You see, John Locke comes out of this movement in Europe. It's called the Enlightenment. European movement in the 17th and 18th century, and it's about all sorts of things, including government. And it presents new ideas about the relationship between rulers and the ruled. How does the king treat the people, and how do the people treat the king? New ideas come from John Locke. Now, John Locke says you get something just for being born. If you're born, you get it. You get these natural rights. And these natural rights are life, liberty, and property. And the king must respect those natural rights. Now, John Locke says that people enter into a social contract with the king, with the ruler. Now, what does this social contract say? Well, it's simple. If you're a person, you got to follow the rules of society. You cannot break the laws of society. But if you are the government, you promise to protect people's natural rights. Okay, who has the power? Well, throughout centuries of human history, the king has always had the power. John Locke says power comes from consent of the governed. Power to the people. That is a radical idea. New, or at least somewhat new, at this time in the 17th and 18th centuries. Alright, So what about that social contract? What if it gets broken? What if the government doesn't protect the rights, the natural rights of the people? Well, then the people have the right to overthrow the government. That can mean revolution. That can mean the end of Great Britain's rule in North America, the start of a new country, the United States of America. That's Locke stuff. Locke is the natural rights guy. Locke's the liberty guy. Thomas Paine is all about how the king is a pain in the butt. Thomas Paine writes Common Sense. Common Sense is a pamphlet which challenged the rule of the king. Common Sense laid out all the things that the king had done wrong in the colonies. It contributed to a growing sentiment for independence. I might be blocking the word independence, but the blank here for number 19 is independence. If you read Common Sense, you are more likely to want to break free from the rule of King George III. So now we got Paine, now we got Locke. Let's write up a piece of paper that is going to end the rule of Great Britain in North America. Let's write that Declaration of Independence. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? T.J. Thomas Jefferson from Virginia writes the Declaration of Independence. Now, he did not just write it himself. He didn't come up with all the ideas himself. He borrowed heavily the ideas of John Locke, natural rights. And he listed a whole section of complaints against the king. Where did he get that from? Thomas Paine. If you read that section, it reads, he has, as it lists all the thing that the king has done wrong to the people. Jefferson borrows the idea of Locke, borrows the ideas of Paine. It's quote time, baby. Give me some quotes of the Declaration of Independence. Here's one. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And what he means by that is man has natural rights, equal natural rights, and the king must protect those natural rights. And what rights are these? Certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ooh! That sounds a lot like what John Locke was talking about in life, liberty, and property. See, Jefferson just tweaks it a little bit at the very end. One key idea about this Declaration of Independence, it is important throughout American history because of key Declaration of Independence principles. An increase in political, social, and economic participation. You know what that means? It means if you are a female slave in, let's just say, Georgia, the Declaration of Independence doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't free you from slavery. You don't have any of these natural rights. But you know, maybe later someone will look at the Declaration of Independence and say, all men are created equal, let's free those slaves. And they might say, all men are created equal, let's give voting rights to African Americans. It gets used later throughout American history to increase political, social, and economic participation. Alright, we still got this war going on. I mean, you can't just talk about ideas all day long. You gotta fight at some point. And the fighting man is George Washington. General George Washington avoided any situation which threatened the destruction of his army. He would try his hardest to avoid big battles, because if he loses huge battles, he could lose his army. And once that Continental Army goes away, the war goes away. How did he keep them together? Well, he inspired his army with great leadership skills, amazing leadership skills, took care of the health of his army, gave speeches to his army, rode horseback in the cold with his army, keeping the army together. But the army itself is just not enough. You need a little help from that country who hates Great Britain. You need a little help from France. Ben Franklin negotiates the Treaty of Alliance with France. And this means that French Navy and Army will come to help fight Great Britain. Now, why would they want to fight Great Britain? Oh, I can think of why. Because they hate Great Britain. And at that final battle of the war, the French were there. French Army and Navy helped American victory at the Battle of Yorktown. And if you tilt your head just slightly, you can still hear the sounds of Yorktown.
Vive la France. Vive la liberté.
The Battle of Yorktown ended the American Revolution. There now is a new country, the United States of America. Now, I know what you're thinking. How am I supposed to ever remember that the Battle of Yorktown was the last battle of the American Revolution? Well, don't you worry, because I just thought of a premium way for us always to remember this. You see, Yorktown starts with a Y, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Y is towards the end of the alphabet, like end of the American Revolution.